Thanks for joining us. My name's Christina Belperio. I'm the Partnerships and Policy Manager for the Tourism Industry Council of South Australia, TIC-SA. I would first like to acknowledge that I'm hosting this webinar from the lands of the Kaurna people. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands from where you will join us today, and the First Nations people participating in this webinar. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of First Nations people and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of South Australia. So our In Conversation series is a series of short webinars as part of our business development program to provide wonderful tourism operators like yourselves with insights and advice that can help you with your business planning and operations. And so while I'll be asking quite a few questions of our guests today, please don't hold back. We really want to make this interactive. And if you do have questions for Jim, pop them in the chat box as we go along, and I'm more than happy to jump to those questions as we go along. For everyone's information, this session is being recorded and we will distribute it to everyone who's registered after we complete. So today's In Conversation is with Solstice Media, the minds behind the publications such as In Daily, SA Life and City Mag. We're lucky to be joined by Jim Plouffe, Chief of Staff and Commissioning Editor for Solstice Media, who's been with the company since 2014. And I know media engagement can seem overwhelming and potentially unachievable for you as an individual business, but I've just been talking to Jim and he's here today to reassure you that this is absolutely possible. In fact, they want you to engage with them and why it's so important and how it can help your business. So welcome, Jim. Hand over to you to tell us a bit about yourself and Solstice Media.
Oh, hi, everyone, and thanks for jumping in. It's like 30-something people. That's incredible. I think I'm more nervous talking to my computer than I would be if I was standing up in front of the room. But yeah, I've been in media more than 35 years. I've worked across Southeast Asia, Australia, in all sorts of different media. I guess I started as a magazine editor until that became not really a thing. And now I'm a digital editor, and I also help make the City Mag magazine. At Solstice, as Christina said, we publish In Daily, City Mag, and SA Life, and we do a bunch of other little things on the side, and other products. We also have a bunch of events, which is the 40 Under 40, the South Australian Business Index, and Regional Showcase. And Regional Showcase actually uses a lot of tourism content in it. Talking about tourism and products and people all over the state. I guess like one of the first questions that I was posed was, like how would you engage with our specific different mastheads? And I'd just give you a little bit of an example. So, In Daily is daily, as the title says, comes out at 12:30 every day. So in Daily, we're looking for what we call hard news. That's 500 words on something that is happening right now, the sooner the better, or has just happened. And, those things, something like a new person joining your organization, you pressing your local council to change a bylaw or something so you can create a tourism opportunity. And even if you are opening a venue or something launching something, whereas SA Life is a small or smaller digital footprint. So that's where the feature stories go. That's where the long form journalism goes, and especially for us, the visual stuff. So, and a great way to think about trying to get into SA Life is to think beyond what you do and think about like what the magazine is. So, if you run a vineyard or if you run a tourism property, well, instead of just thinking, I'm going to pitch and try to get them to, talk about a specific thing on my property, why not think about, pitch them and say, hey, come out and do a fashion shoot here, or, or do like some sort of video, or something that SA Life does, or a property, like if you did a renovation, like a property shoot. And then City Mag is weekly, and as the name says, I hadn't really thought about that. Our mastheads, our names really do describe what we do. City Mag is all about the postcode 5000, and a bit of Greater Adelaide. But City Mag also has sections in it called Get Out, that where tourism gets a good run, telling people who live in Adelaide how to enjoy the state. So those are our three main mastheads, and I just thought I'd give you what they did.
Thanks, Jim. And do you see a different audience for all three of those? Just thinking, obviously you talked about the type of content, and is that because there's a different audience that they're pitching to?
Well, I don't know if there's, SA Life is much more female skewed than in Daily. City Mag, we hope, we always try to promote City Mag as maybe a bit of a younger skew, but I actually don't believe that. I think City Mag, people enjoy it of all ages, but a lot of the content in there would be aimed at the 20s to 30s, the millennials. But lots of people I know who are 50 and above are reading City Mag too. I mean, the main thing about all of our mastheads is that the demographic is fairly skewed towards the AB demographic, fairly high on the register.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And so what do you think are some of the best ways for tourism businesses to build strong relationships with the local media?
That's an easy one. All you need to do is talk with us. I think there's kind of a misconception out in the public that the media is some high in a pedestal thing that it's really hard to get into, and people like we're all sitting here thinking big thoughts and things, and that's really furthest from the truth. Like, we're really people who join media companies. The main thing is that we're curious people that loves telling stories and spreading information, accurate information, factual information, and so often I've heard people say, oh, how can I engage with you? And we're having a coffee and they tell me about a great story. They tell me something that I want to report. So I say to them, I'll just go back and send me a few bullet points, send me a little bit of information in an email, just so I don't forget, and that I have a factual basis to pitch a story on, or to get moving on a story. And I won't hear from them for a day, I won't hear from them for a week, and I'll phone them up and say, hey, I'm really interested in that story, just send me some info. And they always apologize, saying, oh, I'm trying to write a media release, and I'm putting together a press release, and I'm gotten stuck on this and that. And that's not what we in the media expect from somebody that has a story. Like, sending us 5 bullet points on the main things that the story could be about is all we want. I mean, we have fairly short attention spans and not a lot of time, so we just want to read the bullet points and think, yeah, that's a story, or not, or have a basis to start something on.
Yeah, and I think that's really good advice, because the majority of the tourism industry are small operators, and they are not journalists, they're not writers, and so there probably is this feeling of I've got to craft the story myself. But what you're saying is that's not the case at all, and in fact it's probably, in order, we touched on it, Jim, before we came online, but knowing that your story isn't always going to get up, you don't need to put in all that effort to write it as a complete story. So maybe if you just want to comment on what gets a story over the line, and the fact that if you do get knocked back, don't let that dishearten you.
Well, yeah, like, that we certainly don't want you to craft the story for us, because that's our job. We don't come and drive the tour bus, you know. So our job is to craft a story. The way to get our attention is to send us, you know, a story idea that is, you know, timely, that, you know, didn't happen 3 weeks ago and isn't, you know, for in daily. It's got to be within the week, you know. For Essay Life, you might need to think further ahead because, you know, we're already publishing the October issue, you know. So, you know, it's, if you want a story in Essay Life, you would have to pitch something that would be good for November or December. Mm. And so you have to think ahead for that, you know. So what are we talking, you know, summertime stuff. But I think for small operators is that if you've got the story ideas, you just send them in. You know, we'll probably say no most of the time, but you only really need it once or, you know, to get a yes once or twice, and then you won. I mean, I was saying that it's kind of like the Matilda, you know, last night. They shoot on goal and miss a hell of a lot of times, but they only need those two and the nation goes off. So yeah, I would just keep pitching and pitching. There's no journalist who's a good journalist that would be upset from hearing from you too often, because the only way we know what's going on is people telling us what's happening in the regions and things like that.
Yeah, great. And are there particular types of stories or angles that you're interested in when it comes to covering SA tourism businesses?
Yeah, you know, we train a lot of interns here at Solstice, and my main thing to them is to always remember, and this is what you can remember too when pitching a story, is that inanimate objects are not a story. So a new cabin is not a story. You know, a new wine, you know, even a new offer isn't a story. The story is the people who made those things. So stories always have to have people in them. You know, like you can't get a quote from a new caravan. You know, it's the person who designed the caravan, or the person who's towing that caravan, or, you know, or using that caravan, or providing a place for that caravan to be parked. So stories are always about people, and so, you know, I wouldn't also, like, on that, I wouldn't be afraid of using people that you know outside your organization. So I'm just making these examples up, but say you own a tourism property and you hired in an architect to build an A-frame, but, you know, they're just a contractor or whatever. But that's a story, like that architect's views on why the A-frame faces the direction it does. That's a story, not the A-frame.
Mm. Interesting points. Just flipping the way you think about the story there. Are there any emerging trends that we should be aware of from the media's perspective?
What do you mean by emerging trends? Like trends in media or trends in South Australia?
Either or. I guess it sort of links back to, you know, giving our businesses the thought bubbles that they could tap into when it comes to sharing with the media a potential story.
Well, I think the trend in media that everybody has to be, and I'm sure all of you know this, is that, you know, attention spans have really dropped, really dropped. People like magazines and stuff, and they'll watch a movie or whatever, but they're consuming most of their media by scrolling through their feeds and scrolling through news sites. So one thing that, you know, whatever you're thinking about a story, there's got to be a strong visual with it. You know, as I say, it's got to be about people. So a strong visual with a person in it is a must to get somebody to stop on that photo and read, even if it's just the headline and the little blurb. That's a must. And you know, so whenever thinking about a story idea, remember that there's got to be a visual in it. And
And do you expect the operators to provide that visual, or is that something that you, once you want to proceed with a story, that you'll negotiate with them or work out with them?
well, that'll depend on what, like if we're in daily, yeah, we'd probably expect, because especially if we can't just run down the street and take a photo, you know, if it's the Eyre Peninsula or something. But it depends on how big the story would be. SA Life would probably send out a photographer for a feature story, of course.
Yeah.
And City Mag, yeah, we will send out a photographer if we think it's worth it. But no, you know, and the thing is that everybody's got an iPhone or a good phone in your pocket. Like, those phones are better than any camera that any of us grew up with. I can tell you that. as long as you, know you have a go, at least then we can see what something looks like. But that's the trend in media. I think the trend across the state is, it's still, you know, and I learned this from Tixa, like that people are still traveling local. But I think the main thing is that if, you know, if you're engaging with the local media, and this is what I'm here more to talk about, engaging with the local media, is that you have to remember that the story needs to be really local. Like, an example would be that if local media was doing a story on Kangaroo Island, of course we would mention the remarkable rocks or something as part of it. But really what we'd be wanting to do is, knowing that, you know, somebody from Adelaide's probably driven over, we want to go down that dirt road and find out what's at the end of that road that the tourist buses and things like that aren't going to. Where if you're pitching that same story to international media, yeah, you couldn't be much further off that dirt road. You know, like they're not going down those things. So locals want to know the secrets. They want to show up and feel like they're local, and know what pie to buy at the bakery, and you know, what beer is available on tap and things like that. Where, you know, interstate and international visitors want to see the big thing. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Just if anyone does have any questions at any point, please feel free to pop them in the chat function there. But in the meantime, Jim, are there some common mistakes that businesses should avoid when trying to engage with local media?
Oh, the biggest mistake is trying to engage with all of local media.
Yeah,
So,
right.
you know, we all work on the fact that we want to be the one to report it. So, you know, and this happens all the time in South Australia, is especially PR firms and stuff who are trying to, you know, score points. They send out releases, they send out things to everyone, and don't mention the fact that everyone got this great story idea. And so you jump onto it and you're working it up, and lo and behold, the paper arrives in the morning and it's the front page, and you realize that the PR company or the, you know, person gave it to the advertiser 3 days before they gave it to you and didn't tell you, or that, you know, you worked on it all day, you jump in the car and the ABC's talking about it already. That's not the way. Well, you could probably get one story that way, but you're never going to get another story.
Yeah, okay.
Across all media, like, it's called a drop, and, you know, dropping it to more than one, that's just verboten. Like, it's just not a great way of doing things. You know, we want to, I wouldn't call them exclusives, but you want to deal with one person, tell them your plan. If they don't want the story, well then, yeah, phone the next person. And, you know, if they don't want the story, phone the next person. But, you know, that is the biggest mistake. A lot of, a lot of PR firms do it. The government does it. The government's the worst at it, to be honest. That's probably the biggest mistake.
And I guess that's probably, again, comes to misconceptions, that if, you put it out there to the ether, you want to try and get as much leverage off that as possible. But what you're saying is that's actually counterproductive, because it goes against that, the driver for why a media company would pick up that story in the first place.
Yeah, and but you can do it to everyone, but you need to state that you've sent it to everyone. Like it just needs to be obvious. Like don't don't pretend that, hey, we often get the emails, hey Jim, I've got a great story for you, blah blah blah.
Don't call it an exclusive if it's not an exclusive.
Exactly. Yeah. But there isn't really any way to make mistakes. I mean, I that's the only one. Really.
Yeah, sure. And I guess in that same vein, then, if a business did reach out in response, the media are likely to respond quickly, or would it be deathly silence? I guess that's probably where my mind's going, but sometimes you hear nothing. So how do you move on to the next target if you haven't heard back from someone quickly?
Oh, if you don't hear back quickly, move on.
Yeah.
Like nobody. Maybe in a sort of a monthly magazine, you might want to give them a few days to respond. And you might even want to do a little bit of a follow-up, like, hey, didn't hear from you, sending it on to Gourmet Traveler or something like that. But for most media, say dailies, radio, TV, if you don't hear from them, that's a no. You've just got to know. Yeah.
And again, don't be offended if you don't hear anything, right?
Don't be offended by silence or no's. Just keep going at it. Yeah, I mean, the biggest, it's kind of a lottery, really, because what happens is that you need to fit into a bunch of criteria. It needs to be timely. It needs to, spark the interest of whoever's reading it. And lots of times, and that's why I say just continuously pitch different things, because you don't know what's happening in the newsroom. You don't know if that morning you just had the editors got around and said, oh my goodness, the long weekend is coming up and we don't have travel stories, or look at the weather. It's supposed to be 35 degrees this weekend. We need stories about the beach. And you're probably not thinking like that, but if you just happen to land in the inbox on the day that I'm like, oh yeah, Friday afternoon, it's going to be a beautiful day, or it's pouring rain, and we're looking to tell people that winery, we're looking for wineries with fireplaces, if you land in the inbox, that'll probably get you published more than a great picture, whatever.
Yeah, and that in its own right is a really good insight, because I guess we're not necessarily thinking about the external factors that would lead to that. One story could be really appealing at one point in time, but not at a different point in time. And things like the weather, the seasons, the school holidays, the whatever, would really influence that.
I know there's lots of different people and lots of different industry, well, they're all in the tourism industry, but with lots of different products and things. But yeah, you need to plan ahead for those things. Besides monthly magazines, I can tell you, like daily news, TV, radio, digital. We try to plan ahead for the big things. We know when the rates hikes are going to be, and when the grand final is, and Anzac Day and things like that. But news is just continuously evolving, and we can't plan for good weather on the weekend or traffic jams or anything like that. But if they're happening, that would be the thing. I kind of have that makes another point that I had written down, and I thought it probably goes into this. The other way to make sure that you're front of mind and actually getting your story out is actually to become an expert, to be an expert source for the media, for either your region or your product or your industry or whatever. So that, let's say, we know it's a long weekend, it's going to be a beautiful weekend, and we're thinking, oh, lots of people are driving to Whyalla to go and dive with the cuttlefish. Well, we need somebody to talk to about that. And if we know that so and so runs X in Port Augusta or Whyalla or something, and we can phone them and say, hey, like, is all the accommodation booked out, or and be an expert of your region for us to phone. Um, that's a really good way and a good example. I don't see his name on all my things, but Tony Runsley Park,
Yeah.
Perfect example. If the media needs to know what's happening in the Flinders, they phone Tony.
Go to Tony.
I think everybody does, but we certainly do.
But it's interesting how some of these people almost become those inadvertent spokespeople. So obviously over time, Tony, using you as an example, but he must have been engaging with you guys enough that then he became front of mind and a trusted person that you could go to.
Well, he's certainly a trusted person we can go to. I don't know if Tony's on, but like I would imagine that he built that himself. I don't think, I think he had a plan that he'd be, the person for the Flinders. I think, and you can do that, like, and because we all need, especially South Australia, like all the media pretty much is based in Adelaide, and there's very few resources. We have very few people anymore. So to know what's happening in Wollonga, we need somebody there that's saying, hey, did you know that the new intersection is making it easier for people to get through McLarenville?
And I guess, I mean, in terms of the way our state works in the tourism industry, we've got the SATC at the state government level, at TICSA as the industry body across the state, but then at a regional level, we have regional tourism managers as well, who really understand their region and their operators. But I really like that concept that there's those experts at that regional body level, but also then the people on the ground. And I guess that comes back to your earlier point about it's about the people behind the story.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. We need a voice. We need to be able to quote somebody, or
do you think there's any areas of South Australia's media that tourism industry aren't utilising enough?
Yeah, and I think this pains me to say because it should be, hey, Jelly, come in and but I really think radio, local radio. It is, most radio stations are 24/7, even though they're buying in things, but radio, like, I would hate to be a radio producer, having to arrange those segments every day over and over, making them interesting. And radio producers really do have a hard job, and they're always looking for a great story. And I think tourism's always a good story because you're offering escape, you're offering people something new or something that they don't do every day. But radio, I think, is the thing, and those local stations. Of course, I can't name them off the top of my head right at the moment, but like the ones up in the hills, and there's, and then you just need to look at their programs. Is it Country Hour, or is it like whatever? I often on the way home from work listen to Joel Schiller on the ABC. He's always looking for the latest thing or the funnest thing for people to do. And those things are easy to get to. You can Google the radio stations of South Australia. There really aren't that many, and all the producers' names are there with their emails, and you can just send them ideas. And I guarantee you somebody will give you a call, because they, more so than even print or digital media, are always scrambling, because they don't just need a person, they need a voice to be on the show.
Yeah.
where I can get you at any time, write down what you said, and then publish it at another time. I don't have that time pressure.
Yeah. I guess it might be a little bit daunting to end up on radio, but ultimately that's going to be a bit like you and I today, just a bit of a to and fro conversation. And
Oh yeah.
I guess that leads me to that maybe another misconception that the media might be out to find a negative in a story, whereas when what we're talking about is very much looking for the positive stories.
Yeah, I think that's also, there's enough negative in the world. I don't think, I mean, unless, and I'm not here to teach you about crisis management or anything
No.
like that. But unless you've done something bad, then that's a whole nother story. But if you're reaching out to the media with a story about something new that you're doing, there isn't a lot of media that would then turn that into a negative thing. Like really, I wouldn't always understand that could happen. Like if they have an agenda, and you probably want to watch what you say, but there that doesn't happen as much as you think.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes up to the top. That Sean has to worry about things like that. Not
That's right.
somebody who's running a tour of the quorum or something.
Absolutely. So obviously your radio, that's who you think is underutilized. But coming back to Solstice Media, how could, obviously you've got a few different mastheads and products. How would our audience engage across those different products? And do you have any examples of success stories from South Australian tourism operators?
Well, again, it comes down to people. We did a story just the other day in SA Life, which I think is a brilliant example. Jump on it; it's at the bottom of the webpage, and it's Dandelion Vineyards. They've just opened what they call the Wonder Room, and it's up in McLarenville, up right next to Chapel Hill and Samuel Gorge. It's like along that dirt road, if you guys know where that is. Samuel Gorge is one of my favorite vineyards, so I took special interest. But this story really was about their new Wonder Room, this incredible building, really, that overlooks all of McLarenville out to the sea. I mean, from the photos, the view is great. But of course, I've just forgotten her name. The lady who runs it, I wrote it down. It doesn't matter. The lady who runs it, her whole story was that she's from Colombia or something, and her whole story is that she's one of normal people who loves sitting on stairs. Like you go to the party or you go to whatever and you sit on the stairs or and have a drink or whatever. And so the whole front of this vineyard is just tiered stairs where you can sit. Well, that's a really good example because everyone's going to read that story, and it's a beautifully written story. But everyone can understand that, like everyone can understand gathering in the kitchen for a party. There's even songs about it. Everybody can understand about kind of the homely feel of sitting on the stairs while having a drink and watching the sunrise or set or whatever. So that's a good example. The other thing is that another way of engaging with Solstice especially too is you can also advertise, and you can also get like stories written for you through advertising, which actually do quite well. Like the readership, as long as the story is great, the readership clicks on it. But that also editorially, that doesn't get you any favors or anything, but it does put you front of mind, because of course, as journalists and editors on the mastheads, we have nothing to do with the commercial side, but of course we read our own products. And when we're sitting there thinking, oh yeah, we need a Southeast tourism thing, And they're like, oh, look, well, that's an easy one. And we can yell across the room to find a phone number.
That's an interesting point, Jim, about the fact that, and maybe this is what we don't see from behind the scenes, the commercial side and the journalist side of the business are quite separate. So when you see the paid advertisements, that's, I guess what you've just said is that you guys don't have anything or don't have the visibility of what's going to be coming in from an advertising perspective. And it's not,
No.
I guess it's not you're not being influenced by that.
No, we're not influenced by it. But the thing is that, you know, and that's my job. I'm the commissioning editor. My job is to maintain the church and state, as we call it. But, you know, as I say, like the secret to all of this is to be top of mind, you know, to be the person that when I'm sitting there going, oh, we need, well, I have you in my phone, or I've seen a story, I can remember who you are, you know. I know if I call you, you're gonna, you know, like if I call you about Langhorne Creek, you can tell me if the river's overflowing or something, you know. That's all beneficial, because we would never run a story just saying, you know, Joe Blogs says the river's overflowing. It's, you know, Joe Blogs of such and such a business, or, you know, whatever says, and, you know, it's affecting their business in this way or whatever.
And does that differ for a publication like SA Life?
No, not really, because, you know, every month, the journalists and the editors sit down, and, you know, they're looking forward to what they need to do. And, you know, when you need a story, it's better to it's better to, you know, phone somebody, you know, really. And, you know, it's South Australia, we all tend to know each other, so it's, you know, I mean, look at oh, I just lost what I was going to say. It'll come to me. But yeah, you all know people in your region that are always, oh, Chester, you know, Chester and McLaren Vale. Like, you know, I don't know who made him the spokesman for McLaren Vale, but he's, you know, kind of, you know,
I know Chester. I'm pretty sure he's made himself the spokesperson for the McLaren Vale. But you do, coming back to your point, it's about putting yourself out there and then becoming that trusted person that people can pick up the phone and get in touch with you, right?
Yeah.
We don't all have to be Chesters of the regions, but
yeah, like, you know, that's the thing, is just being able to.
Absolutely. Jim, we've had a couple of really good questions that have come in. We have been asked if we can put the email details in the chat where businesses can send their bullet points or stories for your consideration, and we might also send that in the email that we'll send out afterwards. But Anna has asked, is there any value in media kits, such as downloadable assets on a business website that the media can go to? So, you know, contacts, business logos, or etc. Or is it best to send everything in the email with the story details?
Oh, no, I think, like, if you have a website that you can do that on, having a media kit on your website, especially with, you know, like, invest in a few good photos that can sit there and you don't mind people downloading. No, I think that's a really good way, and it's a way of saving you some work, because you can put it up there and, like, leave the basis of it there, and all the information that, you know, you want the media to know about you, your size, how many people you employ, the exact location, you know, anything like that, your products, they can all be sitting there, and you can concentrate on just pitching a little story. You don't have to do the whole rigmarole in an email or a thing. You can just send, you know, more information on, you know, I'm just making up, Kangaroo Island tours, you know, click here, and there it is. And that way you also ensure that whoever's reporting on you at least has access to accurate information, so that the story comes out of probably more accurate than if you had a quick conversation on a phone. But
Yeah,
yes, I
great.
think a media kit is a really good idea just to throw together.
Yeah, and I imagine keep it fairly simple.
To put together properly.
Yes. And I imagine keep it pretty simple as well, just some of
Oh, yeah.
those key facts and figures about your business. Sabrina asks, is there a media or journalist networking event that people could attend to build relationships with journalists?
I don't believe there is, because it usually works the other way around. What you want to do is invite journalists to your networking event, and to your thing, like whatever groups you belong to. Make sure that you invite your local reporter from the radio, TV, print, whatever, along to those things. Another good idea is if through your contacts in your areas, if you know somebody, a photographer, invite them along. I mean, one thing in daily NSA life, one of the most clicked on story things is I Spy or Out and About, the social pages. So if you're ever having um, any sort of social function, and you can get a photographer there and take nice photos of people standing around enjoying your thing, and write their names down. That's the big thing, is that we need to know who they are and got to spell them right. Guaranteed publication, because we need one a day. And they are absolutely, again, Adelaide, everybody's clicking on those to see if their cousin was at their event, or if they know somebody who was at the event. But no, I don't believe there is a networking event specifically for journalists, because it's the opposite. Journalists go to networking events.
Yeah, great. If anyone has any more questions, please pop them in the chat now, because otherwise we'll start to wrap up in the next few minutes. So I guess, Jim, like I said from the beginning, we really like to give our audience on these in conversations some practical advice that they can take with them back into their business. So if you were to give 3 things that our audience can do when they leave this webinar to help them engage with South Australian media, what would you say?
I actually wrote these down. Well, the first thing is take a little bit of time and study that media landscape. Like, go to the places that you'd like to appear in or appear on, and just, it doesn't have to take very long. But for example, you're thinking, oh, maybe that the local radio station. Well, go onto their website and note down what programs they have, like, and so that you can pitch to a specific thing. So you're not just sort of saying, oh, here's a story. You can say, here's a story for your afternoon drive program, or your Saturday gardening program, or something like that, to to make sure that you're going to the right place. So, and it sounds harder than it is. I mean, every media will tell you their sections or whatever, and or just get the magazine and look in the table of contents, and it'll have all the sections. So do a little bit of study, so then you know exactly who to pitch a story to. And then I would, if you're lucky enough to actually work with more than one person, I'd sit down with your team and brainstorm some ideas about people. They have to be about people. Like, sit down and look around and think, brainstorm some ideas. If you live on that property, who built it? Any of the historic facts, people that are coming in and out, but it just needs to involve a person of some sort. And my last one is you can't be shy. Like, you gotta, like, the best way is, once you've established the relationship, is pick up the phone and call. Like, if something's happening or whatever, just phone that number, because we're journalists. That's what we do. We need people to phone us and tell us, because unfortunately, most of the time we're sitting behind our computers typing stuff out and chasing deadlines and doing all that. So, we're often not on the road or out in the community, finding the stories as much as we probably should be. So yeah, pick up the phone and call a story in, call an idea in. Like every journalist, so enjoy that. They'll have a nice chat, because emails are so easy to ignore.
Like a Twitter feed, right? Your emails
Yeah,
coming in.
I mean, I must admit, like part of my email inbox, I basically just pick the top email and the bottom email on my screen and just delete them every morning because I'm like, well, I'm not getting to those, so I'll just get those out of the way.
Okay, so pick up the phone. A few dot points is all people have to have for a story.
Yeah.
I liked earlier, inanimate objects don't make stories.
Yeah.
So you kept referring to the people side of all of this, which is great. And invite journos to your events, to whatever it is you've got going on, and get yourself out there. And contact the local radio. They were the points.
I'm doing myself out of a job. Yeah. No, I think you'd be surprised. They'd be very, very pleased if
Yeah.
you gave them a call.
Anna's asked, are there any tips for finding the right phone numbers to call journalists? Are they publicly available often if people look up the different media?
Well, I think that's kind of where the first, emails probably do work, but most media sites have like at least a general phone number, and there's only two media in South Australia at least that are bigger than just one newsroom, and that the Advertiser. And I mean, I used to work at the Advertiser, and when I worked there, the journalists, we sat on two different floors, so it was a big newsroom. And I can guarantee you they're all sitting in the corner of one of those floors at the moment. There's not that many left. So the general news line, somebody will pick it up and be like, oh, just a sec, and you'll hear them yell across the floor, hey Tony, we got somebody for from the tourism thing, and so like the general number is always there. None of the newsrooms are that big. The ABC you might need to shuffle through, but I think on the ABC website, the local one, you'll find the producers' phone numbers because that's their bread and butter.
Yeah, okay. So that's who look for. If anything, there'd be a general number or the producer as the first port of call.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, sorry, there was one more question that came in through the registrations, which is where or how does travel technology fit into the local and domestic travel media landscape?
I don't know what travel technology is.
I don't know if Martin's on the call. Martin, if you're there, do you want to take yourself off mute? I can't see all the participants. Not there. That's all right. Maybe we can follow that one up with you, Jim, and get a response.
Yeah, I don't really understand that question.
Yeah.
Sounds to me it's doing me out of a job, but I don't know.
Possibly. Well, thank you very much for your time and expertise today, Jim. I found that really eye-opening, and I hope that everyone online did as well, and that you've got a bit more confidence in how to cut through with the media and get engaged and maybe take those first steps in getting a few of those dot points out there. So after today's session, we'll send out an email with a link to the recording and potentially any contact details. If you want to get in touch within Daily. We do have our next In Conversation webinar, which is on the 24th of August, where we'll be talking to Bank SA. He'll be giving everyone an economic update, and Hood Sweeney, who will then provide some tips and tricks around forecasting your budgets and managing cash flow, something that's very much front of mind for everyone at the moment. And so you can register for this and any of our other upcoming workshops through our event calendar on our website. But thank you, Jim, for your time today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And I hope you get out there in that sunshine today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.